This was how Greensburg, Kansas looked on the afternoon of May 4, 2007. A quiet town, nestled in the heartland of America. But when night came, it brought with it the first EF5 tornado of the 21st century. And within just a few minutes, this is how the town looked. Unrecognizable. Table forks and car license plates, curled by the tornado's unimaginable force, stabbed tree trunks. Vehicles were tossed blocks away, crumpled like soda cans. Everything was flattened, except for 2 buildings. Today, we will cover how the Greensburg tornado, with its 205 miles per hour winds, killed 11 people, injured more than 60, and reduced nearly 95% of the town to rubble. May 4, 2007, started off as just another day for the residents of Greensburg. The weather was not pleasant, but this was Kansas, the heart of Tornado Alley. And as one resident put it, "We live in Kansas, so you know, weather is bad all the time and you don't really think much of it." However, some people, like Dennis McKenna, were immediately aware of the dangerous weather that was brewing. It was one of those days where you just knew it wasn't good. The weather was unsettled. It was windy. You could tell the barometric pressure was low because, you'd hear the drains gurgling. And he wasn't wrong. Across the plains, the atmosphere was unstable, packed with energy, and primed for tornadoes to form. Storm chasers were on high alert, and many meteorologists were driving across Kansas with Doppler on wheels, gathering critical data to warn residents before it was too late. Experts had been eyeing this pattern for days. In fact, it was expected that the next day, May 5th, would be an outbreak day. That prediction turned out to be right, but May 4th already had all the ingredients for trouble, too. And while it didn't produce as many storms as May 5th, the day turned out to be far more disastrous of the two. Let's break down the pieces that came together. First, warm, humid air rushed north from the Gulf of Mexico, colliding with hot, dry air from the west. This classic clash creates what meteorologists call a dry line, which would serve as a trigger for storms to erupt. On top of that, a powerful jet stream was screaming overhead, pumping extra energy into the plains. The atmosphere was loaded, but early in the day, an atmospheric cap held things together. Think of it as a layer of warm air that suppresses early storm development. During the day, that cap did its job. But, like a double-edged sword, it also let the atmosphere stockpile energy that would be unleashed when the cap was finally lost. By late afternoon, the numbers were staggering. Cape values exceeded 4,000, even 5,000 in some areas. The wind shear was perfect for twisting storms into rotation. For a while, it looked like Greensburg might just get another gloomy, windy night. Then, just after 5 p.m., a lone thunderstorm bubbled up along the Texas-Oklahoma border. The monster was beginning to wake. At first, that lonely cloud that sprouted on the border didn't look like much. But then, it did something peculiar. It split in two. One storm drifted left, the other turned right. The storm that went right entered Ellis County, Oklahoma. It quickly grew stronger, even producing a couple of tornadoes, but after an hour, it began to weaken. And as it died, it shed off yet another left split. Now, left splits are notoriously poor tornado producers. Most of the time, they just spin away to the north and fizzle out. But this one began to hold together. By the time it crossed the border into Kansas, the original left split had died away. Yet the second one started consolidating, pulling in more energy and becoming a more organized supercell. For a few minutes, it looked like that storm might also lose steam. It even split one more time, which briefly stalled its intensification. But within minutes, the southern portion re-intensified and took on a far more ominous look. By 8:32 p.m., this forgotten left split, the one born from a weakening storm in Oklahoma, was now producing its first tornado northeast of Ashland, Kansas. More would follow, and by 9 p.m., radar was showing unmistakable signs of violent rotation. This was the fifth twister produced by the storm, and the very one that would trample Greensburg into nothingness. At first, forecasters and even storm chasers didn't think Greensburg was in the direct path. The supercell looked like it would pass just west of town. But as it neared peak width and strength, it shifted slightly to the left, putting Greensburg directly in the crosshairs. At 9:15 p.m., in the middle of the dark night, the first tornado sirens were activated in Greensburg. You'd think this would have warned everyone to jump out of bed and take cover, but you have to realize people in tornado regions are used to hearing those sirens. The alerts go off any time a twister is spotted, regardless of its strength. So, it's easy to imagine that dozens of residents initially ignored the loud warning. As one resident explained, "We've all been through it. The whistles blowed and we all just kind of stand outside our doors and look at the clouds and go, 'Oh, it isn't going to do anything.'" But anyone who tuned in closely to local weather updates would know immediately this was not the time for guessing. By 9:45 p.m., the storm was zeroing in on Greensburg. The next few minutes were critical for meteorologists to get people into shelter. Their voices on the radio were filled with an urgency that cut through the night. "Now is the time, Greensburg, to take your tornado precautions. You need to be in your shelters. Your arrival time is imminent. This storm is knocking on your door. A confirmed large dangerous tornado." The National Weather Service issued a tornado emergency, a rare and dire alert. Everyone knows the safest place to ride out a tornado is a basement, but not every home in Greensburg had one. Kelsey Schroth was one of the unlucky residents without a basement. At this critical moment, she faced two risky choices: dash through the whipping winds to her neighbor's basement, or stay inside with her 10-month-old son. She decided to try for her neighbors. But as she was about to leave, the wind's suction force made it impossible to even open the door. Her choice had been made for her. She picked up her son and huddled in the walk-in closet in their bedroom, bracing for the inevitable. The sound came first. A constant, deafening roar that consumed everything. For those huddled in basements and closets, it was the sound of the world ending. For Kelsey Schroth, holding her infant son, it was pure terror. She could hear baseball-sized hail striking the house, the walls ripping apart, and the loud destruction consuming their surroundings. At the moment of impact, the twister was already at its peak width of about 1.7 miles across. This made the town of Greensburg smaller than the wedge tornado itself. At some point, the entire tornado seemed to consume every single corner of the town. It took only about 10 minutes for this massive twister to level everything except for two buildings in the town of Greensburg. And while the tornado dissipated not long after, the damage had been done. Residents who sought shelter in basements or bathrooms found themselves crawling not through doors, but over piles of rubble. It was dark and chaotic. But it was clear that the town they saw, after all the dark and loud chaos, was no longer the same one they had seen earlier in the day. One survivor recalled the chilling sight of familiar trees, "The trees I've known my entire life, if you can recognize them. They were all twisted. There was bark off of them." Emergency workers rushed into town, helping survivors. Everyone was outside, either crying, shouting, or searching for loved ones. Kelsey's 10-month-old son was a priority. He was supposed to be rushed to the hospital, but there was no longer any standing hospital in town. As someone said, "Take him to the hospital to make sure they're okay." We didn't realize that there was no hospital. It was only the next morning that the full scope of the damage in Greensburg became clear. 500 homes and dozens of businesses were completely gone, splintered. Only 5% of the community remained recognizable. No landmarks were left in sight. Even longtime residents found it hard to navigate the place they had once called home. One described the surreal experience. "You're walking through your town, but you don't recognize it. Like all the landmarks that you're used to seeing. The park should be right down after this house, but I don't see that house anymore." Amidst this traumatic scene, residents had to compose themselves and begin the search for missing loved ones, for neighbors, or for anything they could possibly salvage from the ruins. It was as if someone had clicked a reset button that erased 100 years of memories from the town. The beloved Twilight movie theater was destroyed. The water tower, once a prominent landmark, was buried under debris. Kiowa County Memorial Hospital's 10,000-pound roof beam was lifted and tossed onto a vehicle. Cars had been shifted, rolled, or sent flying from where they were once parked. Major local businesses were wiped away along with machinery critical for farming, crippling the town's economic core. This tornado was the first ever to be rated EF5 using the enhanced Fujita scale, which had been released just months prior. This rating represents the strongest possible tornado. And with its 205 miles per hour winds that could turn kitchen forks into projectiles and reduce 95% of a town to nothingness, it truly deserved this rating. Greensburg had become a blank white canvas. But this disastrous event did not destroy the spirit of its people forever. Soon after, the community found the hope and courage to rebuild. As one person noted, when the canvas became blank again, you could paint that community any way you wanted it. Instead of dwelling on the fact that 95% of what it was gone forever, Greensburg turned the destruction into an opportunity. This was a chance to rebuild the town the way they wanted to, an opportunity that rarely presents itself. And true to its name, the town collectively decided it was time to paint the town green. It was time to become a sustainable, eco-friendly community that relied 100% on renewable resources. At first, this ambitious vision wasn't embraced by everyone. One resident admitted, "When they first started proposing green, I really thought it was a gimmick, to be perfectly honest with you." But eventually, those plans became reality. The plan to rebuild as an eco-town caught the attention of celebrities and environmentalists, including Leonardo DiCaprio, who produced a documentary series called Greensburg that covered the town's transformation. This project jump-started the much-needed financial support and attention for the reconstruction. Suddenly, it became a project not just of a small town, but of the entire nation. Now, Greensburg runs on 100% renewable energy every day. It's the first city in the U.S. to have all its streetlights powered by LED. Every bit of its electricity comes from wind energy, and the city implements water recycling systems and constructs new buildings using reclaimed materials. Of course, residents still remember the horror of May 4, 2007. But for the most part, Greensburg has turned that tragedy into a chance for a brighter future, becoming a community that's stronger, smarter, and greener than ever before. The first EF5 tornado in history. Greensburg 2007, and the night the city disappeared. On the night of May 4, 2007, a monstrous EF5 tornado, one of the most powerful ever recorded, descended upon the small town of Greensburg, Kansas. In just 10 minutes, the 1.7-mile-wide vortex wiped 95% of the city off the map, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. This is the true story of that terrifying night. The science behind the superstorm, the harrowing accounts of survival from those who endured its fury, and the impossible aftermath. But it's also the story of what happened next. Witness the incredible journey of a community that, faced with a blank canvas of destruction, chose not just to rebuild, but to be reborn. Discover how Greensburg, Kansas, transformed its greatest tragedy into a beacon of hope, becoming one of the most sustainable, eco-friendly towns in the world. Join us as we explore this powerful story of destruction, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit.